I flew into Chicago the afternoon of October 17th, a Tuesday, little after 2:40 p.m. Because I remember my phone still showing Pacific time, stubbornly stuck 2 hours behind, even after the wheels had hit the ground at O'Hare. The swipe to unlock lagged slightly, a sensor delay I chalked up to crappy airport Wi-Fi and low battery. But at the baggage carousel, the screen pulsed back to life. I had come for work, a research digitization grant from Loyola that meant combing through archived notes, mostly handwritten margins from old anthropology field journals stored at the Newberry Library. I was staying nearby too, at the Ambassador Chicago in the Gold Coast, one of those neutral-toned hotels with creamy lobbies and scent-diffusing machines that try too hard not to smell like anything. I'd been to the city once before, but never alone. Mapping my walking routes had become an exercise in minimizing variables at first. Same streets, same coffee spot, same red line entrance at Clark or Division. I noticed the first thing the very next morning. In the hotel mirror, shaving under those cold white LEDs, I saw, or at least thought I saw, a man walk behind me across the bathroom door frame. I turned quick enough to feel the loose angle of my neck pop, like cracking a knuckle, but there was no one there. No sound, no remnant of fragrance or motion, just the shower curtain, closed a little tighter than I remembered it. He hadn't looked at me, if it was anyone at all, and by then I was already convincing myself it had been something reflected from another window. He didn't stop or react. The figure simply passed, peripheral, cloth dark, with a sort of gray mound where a face should be. I told myself it was a window reflection from the room across the way, or even my own elbow, looking strange at that angle. I got dressed a little too fast that day. The Newberry's reading room is hushed and clement, almost insulating with its old-world furnishings and high-backed green chairs. You move through pages slowly, because the parchment thins toward the edge like leaves left to dry too long. It wasn't particularly spooky in there, just sterile. But the digitizer's console against the east wall, a Xerox Visiotech DS920 flatbed model with temperature compensator, kept freezing at irregular intervals, always on the same document, always on notebooks from Charles B. Manning, a 1940s researcher who spent time among the Ho-Chunk and later moved into early urban sociologies of Midwestern neighborhoods. The freezing didn't happen when the machine sat idle, only when running a page scan. Manning's page 43, his third notebook, was the sticking point. The error came up as a hardware lag, not software. Not scanned. Sensor fail. Red image. Drop detected. I tried cleaning the platen, checking for server backlog, swapping the cable. The IT liaison said it hadn't ever frozen on that model and offered to bring in something newer, maybe with integrated OCR stabilization, but I'd already moved on to the next entry by then. Still, that page, the one that wouldn't scan, had a margin note. The main text was structured field observations, but in the top right corner, in darker, later ink, Manning had drawn a name in small block letters, AIEL. 4 letters, staggered diagonally upward. Beneath it, as if unsure which part qualified as data and which didn't, he had written, "Carries the face of the man you mistake for another." Even as I type it now from memory, I feel like I'm not quite getting the phrasing right. It didn't read like metaphor, it read like observation. I Googled the name that night and came up with scraps of 2005 gaming forums and a misremembered angel reference from someone's thesis on Scandinavian folklore. Nothing anthropological. I began returning to the room at the Ambassador a few hours earlier each night. The days got shorter as I went on, so this meant stepping back into the room about 20 minutes after dusk, around 4:45 or 5 o'clock p.m. The city grew quieter in the evening, at least my pocket of it. I'd hear the lake through the double-paned window, or what I assumed was the lake, a wide hush like an exhale that never quite finished. The fake dark of hotel hallways changed tone after daylight faded. The motion lights came on a second slower than usual, dimming again too early, as if warier of witnessing. Each night I noticed more about the bathroom mirror, not the mirror itself, but what it seemed capable of reflecting, or perhaps choosing to reflect. If I stared too long while brushing my teeth, I could convince myself I saw non-existent seams, as though the portion of the reflection that showed the hallway behind me didn't fully match the hallway I'd just passed through. Slightly off in depth, corner shadows wrong, the sconce light warmer than it should be. Once I entered the sleeping area to check, everything would match. It was only glass deep that it went wrong. Mirrors record, after all. Light and angle. Maybe what's being remembered isn't what you're doing, but something with the same coordinates. Then came the lobby man. I saw him on Thursday night standing near the elevators on the ground floor between bouts of rainfall. The front desk staff didn't look at him once. It was 11:23 p.m., and I can be sure of that because I had my phone out, recording weather notes I wanted to match to a certain photo location the next afternoon. The man wore a dark pea coat that hung wrong, weirdly fluid like the wool was water, not tight or wrinkled like dampness creates, but softened at the edges, no texture catching light. He didn't face me. He watched the brass of the elevator doors as if trying to determine their depth by memory. Even when they opened, he didn't enter, just pivoted slightly, like watching on delay. I walked past him on the way up, didn't speak. I didn't try to verify if he'd get in the elevator behind me. But in my peripheral vision, his reflection in the brass elevator frame bent ever so slightly, curved toward me. It wasn't overt, a bowing of the lines, maybe caused by the bevel of the door. But the image didn't move with the actual man, not quite. I paced my breathing, controlled, deliberate, a trick from early anxiety days, learned in group. That helped. The next morning, everything in the hotel room seemed slightly misaligned. The phone charger had unplugged itself, my Retin A cream had been twisted shut when I always leave it cracked for next use, and the Do Not Disturb card was gone entirely. I bent down and felt inside the crack under the door frame, the usual spot where they fall, and instead pulled back a square of folded notepaper. I unfolded it, expecting some printed guest memo. Instead, it read in long, narrow cursive, "Don't correct what is seen. Not all resemblance obeys origin." There was no header, no room logo. Just that, centered on anonymous paper that bore no blemish from the wood floor dust or foot scuff. I left that day by foot, earlier than usual, walking south through the canyon of N Michigan Avenue toward the Tribune Tower. It was the only route I knew well enough not to have to think about it. But the city had a way of moving slightly ahead of you. Crosswalk signs stalling 3 beats longer, pedestrians arriving sooner than their horizon paths should allow. At the corner of Grand Avenue, in the reflection of the Ghirardelli shop window, I saw myself arrive twice, one optical beat out of sync. I stepped back. The mirror caught up. Nothing repeated. It was a smoothing over, like someone correcting a timeline slippage in post. The only time I allowed myself to say "I'm scared" aloud was on the L, red line inbound, 3 stops before Monroe. I didn't mean to speak. I just exhaled those words under my breath after watching 2 people exit the train with identical gait and shoulder tilt. They didn't look the same, just moved like replicas. One had an umbrella that tapped each left step. The other carried nothing. But the timing of their navigation past the yellow line was mathematically clean, copied sequence, like a choreography drafted first in one body before switching to another. My own face, reflected on the opposite window in the dark, watched me more intently than usual. Eyes always look like they're watching in reflection, I know. But these seemed to parse me, not just observe. The copying wasn't facial, it was behavioral. Like gestures themselves were being learned from me or before me. I reached into my coat pocket and found a small, crinkled receipt from a newsstand kiosk near Loyola Station. Only, I had not stopped that morning. The timestamp read 8:08 a.m., precisely when I had passed under a street awning to check the sky's cloud register. The orbits didn't line up anymore. I skipped the conference I'd meant to attend that Friday. I couldn't account for which version of me would be perceived. Instead, I returned to the Newberry and asked, indirectly, about the copy of Manning's notes. The librarian was gentle but firm, an older woman with a practiced voice. Those materials were on special hold yesterday, recall? You already accessed your daily max. Except I hadn't. I had spent the entire morning at Café L'Appetito across the park, visible through the black iron fence from the second-story booths of the library, watching for movements that didn't echo through light or timing. Manning's copy, again, had writing in a margin that felt added. It now read, "He is only seen when gazed at indirectly. To speak to him aloud begins your resemblance." The ink was fresh enough to raise under my fingernail pressure. I refused to touch it. That night I booked a return flight. In the wall mirror near the hotel desk, the kind angled so you can check your coat line before leaving, I watched myself linger 5 seconds after I had already exited frame. The latency wasn't screen-based. It was built into the optics now, or into the gaze itself. I began to whisper time milestones under my breath. Hallway turn, key unlock, bag zip, and checked each action into a rhythm so I could verify the pace against the reflection. It no longer matched. My last morning in Chicago, I took a final route south, toward Grant Park, through the Cultural Center's mosaic lobby, just to watch light shift through colored glass. Inside, it smelled of humid marble and overhandled brochures. I counted 12 visible security cameras. I looked into one above the grand staircase, centered on the dome, and tried to stare long enough that some record of me would outlast what had followed. As I turned to leave, just past the rotunda, a boy no older than 7 walked sideways across the north corridor, hands held level, palms open as if signaling a stop. His shirt bore the word in stitched navy. He didn't make eye contact, but his shadow imitated mine exactly. Arms moving in tandem, pace adjust for adjust. We weren't walking the same direction. I touched down in Sacramento on Saturday. My phone defaulted too quickly, location services snapping back before the cell tower ping had even settled. That shouldn't matter. But in grocery stores or gas stations now, I catch delayed gestures in freezer reflections. One shoulder dips later than it's meant to. At intersections, I wait to see whether my walk will begin before my foot lifts. My mirror doesn't shave me anymore. It shaves my memory of myself, slightly blurrier, slightly better postured. My voice over phone recordings drops tone midway, correcting upward as though sinking to a different pitch. I haven't contacted anyone from Loyola. I deleted the photos I took of the Manning notes, but one reappeared. Unsent, unstored, reassembled in my iCloud preview last Tuesday. Its metadata places it a year before. The reflection isn't attached to glass now, it calibrates instead, across devices, windows, postures. Sometimes late at night I hear pacing outside my hallway, but not footsteps, just rhythm. Stops, breaths at matching intervals. When I listen on recordings, they're never there. But if I watch the screen long enough, sometimes I blink slightly out of phase with my own image, like I'm considering whether to begin copying too.